workshop is being hosted today by Bryan Hofmann, who's with Filtrexx International. We at WGR have worked with him over the years and have had some very positive results. And so without further ado, I'd like to turn now over to Bryan. Go ahead, Bryan.
Sure. Well, thanks, Aaron, and thanks, folks, for coming in and being a part of this. Let's see. I wanted to share oh, there it is. I wanted to share a screen here. There we go. Hopefully you folks can see that. Again, yeah, Bryan Hofmann with Filtrexx. I'm a licensed or certified QISP, and have been doing this for about 7 years or so. I wanted to talk a little bit, take just a few minutes to talk a little bit about Filtrexx and what we do. And I thought going to our website and just showing that is probably the easiest thing to do. You just type in Filtrexx with 2 X's.com, and it brings you to this site, and it will show you everything about compost and how we can use a recycled material to clean our stormwater. The company started out about 20 years ago with, again, the whole idea of diverting organic material from our landfills. And we've broadened the line, but always tried to stay close to those roots of moving material out of landfills and into a productive use. There are a number of things that we do as a company. We not only sell product, but on the East Coast, we install product. We have an installation crew of about 100 folks back there. Out here, we don't. We just manufacture and sell material. We do a lot of national and local conferences and workshops, and you can find them here on the website. A lot of those are recorded. We also do webinars, and you can certainly sign up for a free webinar. It basically goes into the science behind treating stormwater with compost, and they typically last about 40 minutes with 10 or 15 minutes for questions. We used to do these in person through lunch and learns, but with this era of COVID, we now do it online. And I wanted to just click here on this, just to go into the research behind our material. And there's a tremendous amount of scientific documentation, either by third parties or in conjunction, third parties in conjunction with Filtrexx. And this is the area of the website where you can pull pretty much anything and everything you want about compost and how it can be utilized in various applications, both on the construction side of the permit and the industrial, and even the municipal side of the permits. And there's just a tremendous amount of information here that you're able to pull. And then finally, I wanted to just go up here and talk a little bit about sustainability. And again, Filtrexx prides itself on moving materials that were, again, going to go to a landfill. And of course, that's extremely expensive. Not only for building the landfill, maintaining the landfill, but when the landfill's closed, there's a tremendous cost to monitoring that landfill. So everything we can do to take material out and utilize it for productive use is something that is very worthwhile. And you can see in 2018, we moved almost 800,000 tons of organic material and diverted it from our landfills. And what that does is it helps to prevent or sequester CO2. And you can see the removal rates that just one company, our company, has done, taking out 154,000 tons of sediment out of our waterways, which is just a tremendous amount. And then, of course, taking cars off of the road as well. I want to say that we don't do as much out here in California. In fact, California, even though it produces probably is one of the highest producing states for compost in the nation, it's one of the lowest states in the nation for utilizing compost for stormwater treatment as it relates to a compost sock. And most of this material is utilized outside of California. The reasons for that are primarily that regulators here haven't really taken on compost socks as a way to clean stormwater. Our specifiers, QSDs and QISPs have not. If you asked a QSD, he's more likely to say it's a fiber roll, and so haven't made that. So it's a work in progress, but we have high hopes for California, and hopefully we can move a lot of this material out of our
Bryan,
landfills. Yeah.
Quick note. It's interesting that you said that because at WGR, I was really the first one in our company to come in contact with Filtrexx, and that was through the EPA website. That's how I became aware of Filtrexx. So it's interesting that, you know, it was at one point featured on the EPA website, and yet they're not being utilized out here much.
Yeah, it's utilized in other states just so much more, and actually just a very regular BMP. It's interesting when I go on webinars with our local QSDs. Typically they'll talk about a silt fence, a straw wattle, or a rock bag. I don't know that I hear of any that talk about a compost sock, with the exception, and WGR is one of a handful of entities that understands the compost socks and what they do, and they promote that as part of their toolbox. So, but that's interesting, Aaron. That yeah, it is part of the EPA's program. There are a number of national entities that have specifications for compost socks. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That's the little commercial for Filtrexx. And John, if you want to go ahead and start the video, what we're going to watch here is we're going to watch about a half-hour video, and it'll be with Aaron and I, and we basically go through an Auto-Dismantler site. We we just kind of talk about some things that that you should know about BMPs and what to look for. As you're watching the video, feel free to jot down questions, and then at the end of the video, we'll have about probably 10 or 15 minutes to ask any questions that might be on your mind about it, and hopefully between Aaron and I, we can answer those for you and or get the information to you if we don't have it on hand. So
and go ahead and put your questions right into the chat so you don't forget them, or so I can be looking at them and grouping them together. Auto-dismantlers are notoriously bad for certain pollutants and have their own unique challenges. And so what we wanted to show you here is a real live, in fact, this is a real site, this is not simulated. Last year they had very good performance on their NALs. And so we'll show this video and then we can talk about it afterwards. Just a second. I want to make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Try that one more time.
Good morning, and welcome to a workshop that we're hosting today virtually. Typically, we do these things, and there's a number of you out there that we're talking with, but today we're going to do this virtually because of the issues of the COVID virus. So we're here at a Auto-Dismantler's facility, and today's presentation is going to be talking about something that we don't always do maybe a good enough job on, and that's BMP maintenance and even the installation. So we're going to go through that today, and certainly looking forward to that. We have a number of sites along this facility that we're going to go into in detail. My name is Bryan Hofmann. I'm with Filtrexx International, and today we have Aaron Ortiz from WGR Southwest, a consultant that works with this site. So, without further ado, let's just get right into this and get going. Aaron, maybe do you want to talk a little bit about just the site in general, auto-dismantlers, maybe some of the particular needs of auto-dismantlers? You see a wide range of folks in what you do.
Well, the biggest challenge for auto-dismantlers would be obviously metals, but then of course you have oils, you have different types of fluids. So I'm going to think of when I think of BMPs, what's the first line of defense? Well, good housekeeping. That'd have to be it. It starts there. A BMP is only as good as you maintain it and as you have it in what we call a treatment chain. It's not just one BMP that stands alone that's going to bring you to where you need to be. It's things in combination together that help to give you good stormwater numbers. So a place like this would be a couple of challenges. When you have, of course, the abundance of metals. You have, of course, the sources of oils. So those things you have to think about. And it starts with cleaning up, sweeping up, things like that. I know it sounds basic, but really that's where it starts.
Great, yeah. So with that, we're just going to kind of start walking through the site. So here we're coming up to our first proprietary BMP, and this is what is called a compost sock. Basically, this is a filtration type material. Very simple. It passively will filtrate stormwater. And so the idea behind this, as you see this parking lot and all that sediment and so forth will flow up to this device. It will hit it, it will raise up, solids will fall out, and then there's a media in here that actually grabs the very fine sediment. So as you can see, this has been swept up now before we put our BMPs on here. This one is actually showing an additional BMP that wasn't necessarily in this SWIP. And this is a mat with an Excelsior product inside of it. It again slows down the sediment, catches the sediment in the nooks and crannies of this, and we're just showing that for purposes of education. Inside of this is an insert. We'll show in detail in the next station the cartridge that is inside of this. There's a bucket in it with a drain. We'll go more into detail. Sometimes on this particular type of material, some folks will cut this end off and pour out some media and then actually attach it to this other end, so there's one continuous piece here. But for purposes of this demonstration, and this is the way a lot of folks do it, we just nestle those two pieces together. Want to make sure that there's no water that's going to go through that. If you have concerns about the really heavy downflows, you might throw a rock bag on top of this, sometimes just to hold that all in place. But that should be ready for the season. We would sweep this one more time. There's a little dust that comes out of the BMP. That's normal. That's has to do with the seeding process. But yeah, that's what that looks like.
As a consultant, what am I looking at here? Well, first of all, in this particular application, I would look at this as a drain that we don't necessarily take a sample from. Why do I say that? Well, if you're going to grab a sample from this drain and you're to reach down in order to get your sample, you end up removing your BMPs, you lose the benefits of your BMPs. So in this particular application, you want to do it in such a way as if this drain isn't necessarily a drain where you're collecting a sample, but it's a drain that maybe feeds to your sample point. your point of discharge. So that's why I'd use this particular application like this. And as Bryan was saying, you don't want to put the BMP end on end. Why? Well, because what happens is you end up having spaces in between where the water flows and it's no longer treated. So you want to give every possibility for water to run through something first. So that's why you definitely want to have the overlap, and you want to bring them together so that the water has to work through your BMP and not bypass it.
Now, yesterday I actually cleaned out the bucket, and this is the material that was in the bucket. The wood chips are certainly part of the composted organic media, but lots and lots of sediment inside of there. Aaron, do you remember how long ago these BMPs went in?
They were installed September of last year, so it's been just about a year.
So really, in the scheme of things, not a lot of sediment for, again, this type of a site. I've seen where we literally get an entire bucket full of sediment out of these things. So whatever they're doing on this site, I think they did a really nice job. So.
And something else to keep in mind, lots of times people will, and we recommend as a rule, probably doing your BMPs towards the middle or end of September, because that's shortly, at least in California, before the rains normally come. So you want to get everything set up right before the rains come to get the most benefit from your BMPs when the rains start. However, one thing to keep in mind, a lot of people clean their sites up, do a real good job of getting everything BMPs all set up, and then don't do a whole lot after that. This is a BMPs, or should I say good housekeeping. I know I keep circling back to that, but it really is important. Good housekeeping on a regular basis is really crucial to helping to get your numbers where they need to be, especially when it comes to a facility like this where you have to sample for any number of metals which have relatively low numeric action levels. So you want to make sure that to reach those levels, to reach that level, you want to give yourself every advantage you can. And simply coming around and sweeping things up on a regular basis will go a long way to helping your BMP do its job of helping keeping your water acceptable discharges.
Great. So we're just going to take a stroll here and walk towards our next drain. There's actually 4 drains on this site, and this drain is one that again has BMPs that have been in for almost a year now.
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so.
Yeah. So this is we're just going to walk you through the processes of what to look at, and let's analyze this and decide whether or not this BMP should be replaced for the new year, or if it has a little bit more life in it. What I see with this is that I'm not seeing a lot of sediment on the outside here. I am seeing some staining here and a little bit of sediment here. So the good news is that you're still going to get water to go through the mesh and in the media. The question is the media full? As I'm going into the new season, I would certainly replace this, even though I'm seeing the media or the mesh out here not filled up. The other issue is the holes. These are not necessarily bad, but this certainly is over here. That's going to probably leak some media out. So I would go ahead and take this and move it off.
It depends on your pollutant loading. If you have a lot of pollutant loading or a significant amount, you probably want to change your BMPs maybe twice a year. In September, they may be considered maybe sometime January, February, just to give yourself every possibility of a good sample. If your pollutant loading is relatively low, then perhaps your BMPs can last a year. It really depends on what your numbers are telling you. You have samples. Your samples can tell you whether or not you need to switch out your BMPs. I've had some clients where they were able to hold on for a whole year and it's not a problem. Others, they really need to switch it out at least at a minimum twice a year. It really depends on your good housekeeping. It depends on what you do outside. It depends on what kind of pollutants you have. There's a lot of things. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and pull this grate. I've done some initial sweeping around the site. Let's see, just what we've got in this guy here. Oh, we've got a little bit of cobwebs in here. And so we're going to go ahead and pull the filter out. The filter actually looks reasonably well.
I've seen worse.
Yeah, I've seen a lot worse. The material, yeah, that's just not a lot at all. We're going to go ahead and replace. We're going to go ahead and replace this with a new filter here. But that is not. That's not. That really is not an issue at all. When these buckets are full, they can be well over 70 pounds or so.
That's a good point to bring up. And think about it. If you need someone, get some help. Try not. If you can't do it on your own, don't. It's for safety reasons.
Great. So we're going to stick this in, but again, new cartridge versus the old one. You can still see there's a fair amount of space here. Again, just the bottom of that cartridge has really been affected. You never know what's in the actual cartridge itself, but I would feel comfortable to have that one go at least another rainstorm. But since we're here and we're getting ready for the first,
That's all there's to it.
that's it. Yeah.
It almost seems too simple.
Yeah. Put that back in. Drop that in the hole. And we're good to go for the upcoming rain season. I always like to kind of clean this off a little bit. And grate goes on. I'm going to talk a little bit about this material too. This is a little stronger material than the one that's there. So it's designed to actually be able to drag it on an asphalt or concrete. And we want to make sure that we have a good seal right here between the two sides.
Many times people find with socks you're going to have water back up. I mean, it's natural to have, as they filter through, the flow through I think was 8 gallons per linear foot, right?
7.5 to 8 gallons per linear foot.
So if you find that you have a lot of backup, one thing that we recommend doing is either put another extra sock and making your area wider, so that there's more sock the water can go through. So if you get a little too much backup here, consider putting another sock in and making your loop a little bit wider so that there's more sock the water can go through and drain faster. Just a thought.
And so if I was to measure this, we'd probably say that's 7 to 8 feet. And so you're looking at maybe 55 to 60 gallons a minute. So when Aaron talks about putting it out here, you might be able to double, triple, quadruple that number to 100 to 200 gallons a minute. So if you have the space, that's certainly a preferable method. And the other point is, if you have the space, it again adds another layer of the treatment train you were talking about a little bit earlier. Now all of a sudden you've got an outside ring, one treatment, a second ring, and then the final unit down inside of the basin. So. And
one more trick that I'd like to talk about. This is something that Bryan had mentioned to me years ago, and it's a really good trick. If you do use, in this particular case, for Filtrexx, they have a particular product where it's designed called metal locks to help pull out additional metals from water. What I would recommend is if you do use a metal lock sock, you put that one on the inside ring, and you want to put some silt socks on the outside ring. Why? The silt socks act like your first line of defense. They'll come and they'll filter a lot of the solids, they'll filter a lot of oil and grease, they'll grab a lot of things, and then that'll leave the second layer of water to go through so that your metal locks can do the job of pulling more of the metals out of the water. It's a double filtration. It increases the ability of your water to have better numbers. So just something to consider. Again, if you have the room.
So these socks are designed, once they're put in place, to stay in place. And some folks will move them around thinking, hey, I need to clean my side up, and then put them back in place. Some folks will actually flip them over and try to utilize what they consider is more area of the media. And that really can be detrimental on a site, especially an industrial site that has very tight benchmarks. And so this is, consider this like an air filter, if you will. An air filter you leave in place, it grabs all the dust and so forth, and when you take it out, if you bump it, you see things move around. It's exactly what can happen with these socks. If you start to move them, it jostles up the media, and so the next rain event, you can actually have a surge in pollutants, be it sediment and or metals in particular, and we've seen that. And so be sure that once you put these in, the only thing that you do to them is you sweep the outside of the mesh lightly to make sure you knock off any caked on material. Other than that, sweep around, sweep inside, but don't move the device until you're ready to actually change it out.
And something else to consider, if this were a sampling point, if you're gonna grab a sample from here, you wanna set this up just like you see here, where you've got enough coverage, you've got it, you know, not end to end, but also that way you can remove your drain grate to get to your sample without jostling or moving the Filtrexx. If you have it over the drain, or you move the drain, or you go like this and you pull it off, what are you doing? You're basically just sponging it back into the drain. So this is a good setup here where it gives you enough room where you can get your drain hook and you can pull the lid off without necessarily disturbing the Filtrexx, and that's what you want.
Great point. So yeah, we're going to move on here to another application, and roofs are a real issue, and Aaron's going to talk more about all the things that roofs and buildings can add to the site. But I'm just going to talk real briefly about this particular BMP. This is a downspout, and again, all we're doing is we're laying a sock around it. I pre-swept this fairly decently to keep it nice and clean. A couple things you want to be considerate of is if you back up water, is it actually going to go into the building or not? So kind of keep that in mind. But if that's not an issue, and typically a size like this doesn't have it back up that badly, then it can run out here. Now you get another treatment for the roof material prior to it going back in the drain. So Aaron, you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, the challenges that I found with roofs is, for example, at facilities like this, they have to look for zinc, okay? Well, as you can see, this is galvanized sheeting, and even though it's painted, which is a good idea, the paint is not exactly new, so you can see that there's opening and there's gaps in the paint. Well, that means where there's exposed galvanized sheeting, you're going to have zinc that may leach out into the stormwater. And well, technically, building structures are not considered, part of your pollutant assessment in terms of pollutants, that for industrial activity. The bottom line is when you have a yard full of metals and you're looking for zinc, how are you going to say, well, this much of our zinc is coming from our roof as opposed to this much zinc coming from all the metal sources in the yard? So if you can do this, it's a good idea, simply because, especially if you have galvanized roofing, you want to have an extra layer of protection to collect, especially zinc in this case.
Question, what are other things that can happen on roofs? I mean, can you get, I've heard stories where folks get blow-in from other facilities up on the roof. Do you ever run across that?
We do. We have one client that was having nitrates, and they actually, even though they're SIC code, their standard industrial classification code, required them to include nitrate and nitrite as nitrogen in their stormwater sampling. They had no industrial activities that actually included that, but yet they kept going over the numeric action level of 0.68 milligrams per liter. And so we looked and we tried to find any industrial activity, could not find any industrial activity that would cause nitrates. But we did find that there was a fertilizer facility that was upwind from them a few hundred to maybe like a half a mile away. And so we did some air deposition testing and found that they actually had nitrates contributed to the facility from air deposition. And so we were able to, they had a level 2 technical report where basically made the argument that it was a non-industrial source. It was coming from off-site, and we proved it. But also on roofs, if you have venting, that's a big issue. People say, hey, it's just a roof, what's the big deal? Well, if you have industrial activity inside and it vents to your roof, that's going to wash off down your storm drain. So just because something's done inside doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to make it outside. So that's another good reason to have extra layer of protection, simply because you don't know what's being vented to your roof.
Great points, Aaron. Yeah. So we've done 3 different stations here. We're going to move on to our final application for this particular site. Before I do that, I just want to mention a little bit about this silt sock. We've been doing this for about 18 years or so, and really haven't changed the format of putting a filter media inside of a sock. And what we like about this so much is it's so versatile. You can use it in so many different ways on a particular site. You can stack it, you can curve it, you can bend it. It conforms to the hard surface. You don't have to trench it in. These are all really admirable qualities in a BMP. You want to be able to have one that you can use in a number of different ways. This last application is for perimeter control. And a lot of times on industrial sites, you might get run-on from another site. And so with this application, we know that run-on is coming from off-site. And so you could certainly put some of this material down just to try to capture any of that material if you felt that the levels were high enough to offset what you were doing yourself. So again, a nice application is just to put this again on the upside of the property for the drainage downhill. So.
Couple points. One, you notice, again, we talked about the overlapping layering. You don't just put it end to end. But 2, also, if you do decide to use a silt sock, they also come in 160-foot lengths, I believe. So in this application, as you can see, the whole yard, or maybe it's hard to tell from the camera, this part of the yard's higher and it flows towards the west. So in this case, putting just one sock at maybe 160-foot sock all along the perimeter here might be a good idea. That way you have one continuous sock without necessarily any breaks. And if it's not long enough, you can always then you'd want to double layer it that way. So that's another thought. You can just get a pallet that's 160 footer and put that along your perimeter as well.
Well, that's it for applications. Now we're just going to take you on a quick overview of the actual product itself, some things to look out for. And we would recommend this for any BMP that you're looking at. Understand what the BMP is good at, and I would encourage all of you to, again, we're going to talk about one particular BMP here, but when you're looking at BMPs, just in general, know what you're getting into and what you're buying. Make sure that it has third-party testing and that it's doing what the design calls out for on that site, and what the stormwater consultant is recommending for that site. Manufacturers are certainly happy to do that. Your stormwater consultant can answer some of those questions, or possibly all of those questions as well. So that's the biggest point, is know what that material is all about. So we're going to talk very briefly about Filtrexx products, and again, we've kind of gone into talking about the applications, but what's actually in the material and why does it do what it does. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut open the silt sock material here and pull out some of the media. This is a composted organic media, and though it looks very random, it actually has a specific design to it. And it's designed to flow as much water through the device as possible while capturing as much of the pollutants as possible as well. So that's that material. This particular product will grab pollutants in 3 different ways. First of all, physically it traps the material inside of the nooks and crannies in the media. We're slowing the water down, so some of the heavier material is falling out in front of it. So that's all physical. Chemically, there's an ionic exchange that goes on. The material, the organic material, is charged differently than the pollutants and sediment, and as we all know, opposites attract, and so those pollutants are actually getting pulled into the media itself, and so with all. And then the third one, of course, is this is a living, breathing material with microbes, and so it actually can degrade some of the pollutants, certainly oil and grease. So that's the silt sock. This comes in a 5-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch, 18-inch, 24-inch, and 32-inch diameter. And depending on the parts of the country, depends on how much rainfall you're getting, that will dictate the size of the material. For industrial sites out here in California, we typically see 8-inch and 12-inch socks used on a regular basis. I'll briefly talk about this material here. We did, let me just go ahead and cut this open, and you'll see again it's the same mesh structure. The mesh has an 1/8 inch opening. We want to get material into the media as quickly as possible. This is an Excelsior, and this will certainly slow any of that sediment down. And then there's a recycled mat that is put in there for basically weight to hold that on top of the grate. So very simple structure, but does a good job of attracting sediment. This is the cartridge we talked about. The media inside this is a little finer than the media that we showed in the silt sock, and it also has adsorbents in there to collect heavy metals and nutrients and hydrocarbons that are of concern. A very aggressive filter, on the marketplace. And so here we have a newer version of that mesh. It's a heavier weight mesh, and so it's much stronger than the one that we've had for years and years, and we're finding some really good applications for it being able to drag it on asphalt. Then we're back over here. This is our EnviroSock line that we see on a lot of industrial sites, and this material is the same media as provided in the silt sock, but then we add these adsorbents into it, and this particular sock we've now changed to the color orange, because so many times one of the biggest things about maintenance is people are driving over it. And on that front, one thing that we didn't talk about is if you do get excessive folks to drive over these, we would recommend putting up something, whether it be a cone, maybe changing to the orange color. Some folks put concrete barriers around it if you have enough room. This site is very tight, so that would be very difficult, but certainly if you have larger areas, putting up concrete structures in order to maintain these is very important. We want to try to maintain the health of your BMP as much as possible.
And in this case, especially like in high traffic areas, socks may not be applicable. I mean, we saw that they were getting kind of beat up. Consider putting in some sort of filter. In this case, we're talking about Filtrexx, because that way they're subterranean. You don't get run over with that, and then they'll still be able to filter your water.
And that's really it from this auto dismantling site. Hopefully you pulled away a few nuggets. Again, feel free to hit that chat button and ask your questions. Aaron, are any final thoughts?
Just one. During the years ago, we had another stormwater permit in California. It was a 97 permit. And something that word used in that permit was the iterative process, the step-by-step process. And that's what we're talking about here. I talk about layers. So let's take it one step at a time. Before you expect to go to some sort of $250,000 to $500,000 treatment system, how about we start with the basics? I know, so we'll circle back to good housekeeping on a regular basis. I know I said a lot, but it really is key. And then let's start with putting some socks in it. If that's not enough, put in some filtration in the side of the drains themselves and see if that helps. Maybe add some filtration to your downspouts. And then eventually, if you find these different layers aren't still enough, then you'll have to go to something a little more expensive or more in terms of a treatment system. But let's start with the iterative process. So step by step, let's start with something smaller, see if that works for you, and take it from there. So part of that is being proactive in your maintenance. If you, like I said, I recommend changing maintenance in September and sometime in January or February. However, if you walk out and find that there's a sock that's damaged pretty badly, or if you find that your numbers are starting to climb up, well then, anytime's a good time to change your sock. I mean, if that's the case, then consider just replacing your BMPs at that time. So it really comes down to staying on top of your maintenance and staying on top of monitoring your water and see where your water is going. Do we need to do this? You know, and take a look at it's a holistic program. It's not just one piece. It's part of a larger treatment train, from practices to monitoring.
That's a great point. We get asked the question all the time, when should I change out my BMP? And we can give you some broad guidelines, but it really depends on the pollutant loads that you have at the particular site, be it sediment or any of the other constituents. So to your point, really watch it closely, and you will become the expert. Within that first year, you'll know your BMP, you'll know your site, and you'll understand what it takes to do that next change out. So,
Absolutely.
Great. Well, again, Aaron, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you all for watching this as well.
All right, Bryan.
Okay. Well, yeah, a number of questions here. Let me just pull up this chat function again.
I know
Maybe
quite a few of them got answered actually later in the video.
Yeah, they really did. There was one about a filter, a stormwater filter for downspouts, and we do have one. It's for large downspouts. One of the issues with downspouts is how do you filter water real time and not back the water up? And so with the device that we have, it's actually a 4 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot tote, and we fill it full of media. Water goes in the top and then comes out the bottom, and we put that right at the base of the downspout. So for small downspouts like on this particular site, it certainly wouldn't make financial sense, but we definitely do those for some of the larger facilities out there.
Bryan, can I jump in here real quick?
Yeah.
I see a question. There's a question you probably want to answer from Glenn Stevens, but there's a question from Wendy Huang. It's a good question. She says, if the storm drain is covered, how do you collect stormwater for lab monitoring? Well, we kind of addressed that a little bit in the video, but the bottom line is you don't want to cover up a drain that is a monitoring drain. That's why I recommended if you're going to have a drain that's going to be used for monitoring, you don't want to put the Filtrexx mat on top of it. The whole point is you need to have access to that drain. So you want to if you want to put a sock around it, that's fine as long as it's appropriate. Just make sure the sock is opened enough so you have access to pulling off that drain cover without disturbing the sock if at all possible. And then in terms of grabbing a sample, they're usually at least in the Filtrexx Stormexes, they have those openings where you can run bottles through. So Bryan, why don't you address how to grab samples from, for example, from a Filtrexx insert?
Sure. So, and we didn't point that out in the video, but at the bottom of that bucket, there was basically a 90-degree angle, and so what you would do is you would drop, well, so on round catch basins, you would actually have to put another hole in the ground for your monitoring port, and then run that pipe over to that next hole. Thanks, John, for doing that. On square catch basins, we actually put a port in the catch basin frame, and then you would take your bottle down, and water would come out from the 90-degree angle pipe, and you would grab your sample there. It's extremely, as conveyance systems typically have or can have a lot of pollutant loads in them. If you can take your sample directly from a filtered cartridge, it certainly can help increase your chances of getting a good stormwater sample.
And Brian, although it wasn't called out by name in the State Water Board's sampling video that recently came out within the last year, this device is actually featured. In fact, Aaron, I think you showed it on your Stormwater Awareness Week workshop. Was that your part 3?
Yes, I had some time left on my part 3 workshop, and so I like to show that video because it really does a good job of highlighting different approaches and how to collect samples correctly, or at least some approaches. That's not one size fits all, but it gives you some suggestions, and I thought that it was appropriate.
But this very device is featured in that.
It is.
And to Glenn Stevens' question about the Filtrexx sock, and does it grab metals and oils? The silt sock will grab all of that, but it's typically designed to grab sediment. The Enviro sock with what we call the industrial blend is the one that really targets metals, oils, and nutrients. And it does it both physically and with those sorbents we talked about, natural sorbents that we put in there to grab more of the soluble materials. So,
I will add that we did our own testing here at WGR on Filtrexx because we wanted to see how effective it was for ourselves before we suggest this product to other people, to our clients. And to our surprise, we found that the regular silt sock in and of itself did a pretty good job of pulling out not just solids, but pulling out oil and grease and metals to a certain degree. So that's not necessarily what they're targeted for solids, but it does pull out some metals and some oil and grease as well.
Absolutely. And again, we get a lot of questions about iron and aluminum, and we've just recently put iron on our list of pollutants that we grab, but it's actually at a very low rate. It's like 22% is what we show on our label. But really, we're only able to grab iron and aluminum in the particulate form. So if you have, again, a lot of particulates, the chances of the numbers coming back very, very good in a standard silt sock are very high. If it's soluble, say it's soluble copper or zinc, the chance that silt sock can do as good a job as the Enviro sock goes down a fair amount, just because those sorbents in the Enviro sock are designed to specifically go after the soluble parts of that pollutant.
Yes, I had a client where they were having metals issues, and so one of the things we looked into is, well, what percentage of it is particulate and what percentage of it was dissolved? And so this year they're in the process of taking a look at that and say, okay, well, how are we going to target our BMPs? So one was they're going to collect dissolved metals as well as total metals to see what the difference is and determine what percentage, roughly what percentage of it was particulate and what percentage of it was dissolved. That can help you in your overall BMP plan for your site.
Also, Brian, I'd like to add something as far as application. We have found that it is best to double up Filtrexx. In other words, stack it on top of each other or go to a larger diameter. The reason being is that the more weight, the better conformance you get to the surface, especially on asphalt or something that's not completely flat. It might have some, aggregate or a little unevenness to it. By stacking it, double stacking it, you get more weight and it gets better conformance. We've done testing, as Aaron mentioned here, and we've noticed that even the smallest little slipstream will completely undo the results you're hoping to get. And so you've got to pay attention to details. You can't catch 98% of the flow and think you're good. That 2% that's getting by untreated will completely foul your results. So by paying attention to detail, double, like they were talking about at the ends, overlapping them. We even like to have 2 circles around because the product's relatively cheap, but having bad results is very expensive. And so doubling it up and getting that weight to press it down on the surface, we've seen performs very well.
And something else I saw as a consultant over the years is sometimes people are grabbing samples from inside a drain and come to find out there's outside influences they had no idea. A couple of years ago, I went to a site in Stockton, West Stockton, and a professional engineer and I went out and we started looking at the drain falls and determining where the flow was. And we determined there were a lot of places that had been sampled prior to our taking over that actually had influences from off the street and from different places. And so they had to adjust where they collected their samples because where they were collecting their samples was not representative. So something to keep in mind. For example, the auto place where we were, the dismantler, where there cuts through their yard is a conveyance pipe that connects the whole neighborhood. So that's why they collect samples from several drains and not just one inside one drain, because if they grab samples from inside the drain, they're collecting samples from the whole neighborhood. And so that's why they had to change it up and grab samples on several locations on their site because that's representative of their samples.
Oh, great point. The other comment, I'll back to John's comment about stacking the material, and when we recommend stacking, we typically do it in a pyramid fashion, just for stability. But yeah, we like to see that weight as well. We also it's nice when the media is wet, and so as that that first rainfall happens, it tends to settle the media on the surface and seed it. We talked a little bit about the seeding process. So you're welcome to go out there. Well, actually you're not, because it would be a non-stormwater event. But if you could put a little water on these things before that first event, that would help as well. So again, all we're trying to do is mimic Mother Nature. This is what nature does, all the time. Creates its own compost and buffers that soil with a blanket. And we're just basically using that same kind of technology inside of a mesh structure.
And actually, Brian, you brought up a good point. We call it seasoning the Filtrexx, but we will take for very sensitive spots. This is typically where we're going to be sampling. Probably people notice the dust coming off the virgin product. We will actually season it, wet it down in a permeable area, like in a landscaped area, get it wet, wash it pretty thoroughly, and then put it out there, especially if we're close to the time that we might be sampling.
Yeah.
Another application comment, I have a client where they have a bunch of ditching, and in California, stormwater is very episodic. I mean, you can have light rain, and all of a sudden you can have a deluge. And so there are times where their Filtrexx, they were using 8-inch, and it was just being pushed aside by the water pressure coming. So they changed to a 12-inch sock to give them a little more weight and a couple of layers. They put a couple of layers of pyramids of the 12-inch sock into a U shape, so that way the sock can handle the weight of the PSI coming at it.
No, exactly. Or again, put a rock bag or two on top to try to hold that either on top or behind it or downstream. Help to try to help keep it in place. So, yeah.
Yeah, we did that. The 8-inch had several rock bags, and it was amazing how the water pressure just pushed it out of the way. So you mentioned the 12-inch socks, so that's an option that people consider, and in conjunction with rock bags or other things to help keep it in place.
Sure.
And the 12-inch allows 11 GPM per linear foot.
Right, right.
Okay, looks like we don't have any more questions. If anyone has a last minute question, feel free to unmute yourself. We're a small enough group, or type it in real quick. Bryan, obviously, if they want information, they can call you. What's the best way to get a hold of Bryan Hofmann?
Sure. You just go onto the website and call into the 800 line, or under info, just say you want to talk to me, and it comes, those emails will come directly to me, or my direct line is area code 209-200-7841. So feel free to reach out. Again, we do site visits. Again, I'm a certified QISP. We do site visits for free. It's primarily around our materials, but we can give suggestions on and again, this is typically in conjunction with your water consultant that you're dealing with. But if you ever want a second opinion, or how our materials are functioning, feel free to reach out. Happy to come out to your site.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Bryan, for being a part of today. And we really appreciate your willingness to share some experiences. And also, Aaron, thank you for sharing experiences at one of your industrial general permit sites. And so, all right, well, everybody, that's it for this workshop. Again, I hope you can take advantage of some of the other great workshops being offered. Again, they're all free. Tell someone about them. And if you miss one, you can watch it recorded, and they'll stay up for quite some time. So don't feel like you have to hurry to get to them all. But there's some real good workshops. So thank you again, Bryan. And
Thanks, folks. Okay.
Everyone have a good afternoon.
Thank you.